Welcome back to another episode of Between Two Toes.
What's going on, guys? It's Rob Hall and Alex, and today we are talking about the Sigma I series of lenses, which is 4 lenses. This is not a lab review. We are not talking about chromatic aberrations or lens flaring properties. We put these lenses through their paces for about 3 weeks. They were provided to us by Sigma.
They were provided by Sigma. We've already sent them back. No money changed hands, and they're going to see this video as soon as it's already up.
The 4 lenses we're talking about today: 24mm f3.5, 45mm f2.8, I skipped one, 35mm f2, and 65mm f2. We use them on the Sony E Mount series. We had all Sony E Mount equipment, so that's the versions that we have. But it is important to note that these lenses are available for Sigma, Leica, Panasonic, all of their full frame equipment, as these are full frame lenses.
I'm glad that you mentioned that though, because when we do eventually get to value proposition, it's going to be specifically for the Sony lineup.
So first things, how all these lenses are the same. So these are all full frame, and these are not the fastest lenses in terms of aperture, right? They're not the widest aperture possible. There's definitely wider apertures available, but that's not really their design. These are designed to be compact, which normally comes with having a more narrow maximum aperture, but also, despite being compact, they're not very lightweight. These are really designed to be premium build quality, premium durability, metal design, even down to the lens hood is metal, even down to the lens cap is metal.
I think the term I kept using was luxuriously tanky.
Yes.
That's, I think, the biggest stretch for us is going to be describing the feel, because the feel of these lenses, just overall, like in use and just actual touch and weight, all of that is, I think, their biggest selling point, and it's really hard. There's no stats for that.
Right, right. Yeah, except like 10 out of 10 build quality. That's
would touch again.
Yeah, would touch again. If I had to liken them to another series, they're nothing like G Master lenses. Like G Master lenses, especially the more modern ones now, feel more lightweight. These are more like Zeiss or Fuji lenses.
Absolutely.
They feel very solid, and there's so much attention to detail into how they feel. Yeah, like even the manual focus experience is just absolutely delightful on these lenses. It doesn't feel like a fly-by-wire, which is shocking that they are.
Which reminds me, I was scrolling through Sigma's full page write-up about the I series and their focus switch, just the manual to autofocus. They apparently rebuilt it to be more tactile, but then when they rebuilt it to be more tactile, it was louder. So then they reinvented their lubricant, so they have a noise dampening lubricant in the manual focus switch. That's how deep this rabbit hole goes as far as feel, which you get it. As soon as you put it in your hands and you use it, there's no question about it being premium.
Definitely. And even beyond the manual focus experience, the autofocus experience, which is always a big question mark when you get into third-party lenses, thankfully, all 4 of these feel absolutely native. That regular autofocus, face detect, eye autofocus. I used it on the A9 Mark II, the Sony A7S Mark III, the A7R4.
I used it on the A7 III. Yep.
Yeah, so we use it on 4 different bodies, and it just feels like you're using a G Master or Zeiss lens in terms of autofocus performance. And then lastly, in terms of premium, they also have a metal magnetic lens cap. Now 3 out of the 4, the 24, the 35, and the 65, it comes included. It's in the box. The magnetic lens cap is an option, but you also do get the traditional pinch lens cap that's plastic. The 45mm, it's an option, but it's not included because that was released earlier. So that is also available. That magnetic lens cap is good and bad.
It's cool.
Yeah. So Sigma made a pretty funny video about them testing it. Not only do they have the magnetic lens cap, you've got the experience of taking that on and off the lens, but they also have this little donut keychain accessory.
Which that's when it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
to just
so you can slap it. You have a place to put that magnetic lens cap, and it's not coming off. They
did not cheap out on the magnets at all.
No, very secure connection, and it's really nice to just be able to kind of not even look at your lens, just toss it kind of in the general vicinity, and it's like using mag mod gear. It just
Yeah,
grabs
if
on.
this wasn't lended to us, there'd probably be some B-roll of you yeeting on, no question.
100%. If I didn't have to worry about scratching those and returning them in very nice condition, it would be how far can we connect these magnets?
It'd be a TikTok of the end of the night of a wedding, just
Trying to get all four, that'd be the best TikTok. But it's not perfect because as soon as you flip the all metal lens hood,
It's such a good lens hood, but yeah, once you use it.
yeah, the lens hood is beautiful. Once you flip that, it becomes a rather awkward experience trying to get that lens hood
Like,
on and off.
it.
More so off than on. Because on, you can just pitch it kind of inside the lens hood and it finds its place. But taking it off, I do not have ridiculously big sausage fingers.
You know, I just realized it's
Still a
for
problem.
photographers with full sets. To like, you know what full set is? Like the nails that are like 3 inches long,
my
so they've not
gosh.
been clipped. So you
Yeah.
can just like,
Pinch it around.
that's
Yeah.
what it's for.
Apparently, it is not simple, especially if you have even average sized hands, to get your finger in between the lens hood and get the leverage necessary because there's nothing on the center to grab. And I appreciate how well they're balanced and everything, but in terms of function, they really need something like when you're pulling a drain, right? You need something
Just
to grab in
a
the
divot
center.
on either side with a tab in the middle that you could just pinch and pull on.
Yeah, if they could
Done.
still keep it balanced with all that, that would be beautiful. But yeah, it really needs something there because I don't know. I feel like most people are going to appreciate the durability and have that lens hood out to protect their lens. So you know, if you still want that magnetic benefit, then you need an easier way to grab it. That's how they're all the same, and I think now we can go through independently. Let's start at the 24 and go up to the longest one.
I say we do that.
Now, one thing I want to note before we get into this is we're going to be citing how there are Sony alternatives on the E Mount that kind of make you have pause maybe about whether or not you should buy this lens. For instance, Sony just released the G series, which are also smaller tank-like lenses.
Tank-esque.
Yeah, and those all present an alternative to the Sigma series, but it's really only on Sony. If you're looking Panasonic, if you're looking Leica, there's definitely other options. And if you're looking Sigma, then these are more so your best option if you're looking for the compact series, and especially with Leica. You know, if you're looking for a lower cost alternative, then these are really great. So your experience is going to change depending on what camera system that you're buying these lenses for. But we're going to talk about it in the framing of Sony because that's what we use. So 24 millimeter f3.5. First thing I thought of when using this lens, despite its great autofocus performance, despite how durable it is and how great of a feeling lens it is, I just felt a little underwhelmed about the f3.5.
That's fair.
And that's strictly because of, as we just talked about, alternatives, right? I already have the 24 millimeter f1.4 G Master, which isn't much heavier than this 24 3.5. It's larger, but it's not much heavier. And so when you're considering a lens with an f3.5 maximum aperture, there needs to be a significant savings in terms of size when you're comparing it to something that is 2 to 3 stops brighter, like the 24 millimeter f1.4. But in terms of alternatives, on Sony you've got 24 millimeter 2.8 from Tamron, 24 millimeter 2.8 from Sony, the new G series one. So there are other options that are 2/3 of a stop wider maximum aperture, and so that just becomes something to consider. And there's just not much size savings with the Sigma, despite the fact, every time I want to say, it's so well built, it's so premium feeling, it's so nice.
There's no question of its value there.
Yeah, I will say I was particularly impressed with how fast its autofocus performance was, because a lot of times in that wider lens, when you're showing, you know, everything is so small. It's not like you can just fill a frame with a face, although you can do that on this lens. There's so much contrast that your autofocus normally dances between a lot of the subjects when you're using a wide focal length. But this seemed to really do a great job of locking on. Eye autofocus and face detect were still normal experiences. I always love when you've got that one tiny little square tracking an eye and you see it kind of
just
buzzing around the frame. I used the 24 a lot during a live performance that I was capturing. So we're talking about students buzzing past each other. And I felt it was an excellent experience the whole time. I remember in particular this one actress throwing a fit on the floor on the stage and like moving all around. Her head was disappearing and she's rolling over back and forth, and it was just tracking her the whole time. It would switch between her body when her face wasn't available and then her face when it was available, and just look at the shots and they all look fantastic.
We are living in the future.
But that f3.5, I did feel I didn't have the separation that I would like in that one. Yeah, because I'm trying to focus on one student and tell just that story, and unless they were really close, f3.5 just wasn't really cutting it.
Yeah, which is hard because like the 24 2.8 for Tamron, like we've had that, we used it. It's not great, but it's also what, a half the cost,
right?
You know, so if you are just trying to talk budget options in the Sony realm, it is like $300, and I think it's worth the 300. Maybe it punches a little bit above that, but then again, it's like you can skip up so high in quality so quickly. But yeah, for me, the 24, I took it out on the streets, and then, you know, I did some photos with that. On the streets, the mean streets of the D. But I also used it a lot for that, for a dance shoot that we did for video. And on the video side of things, I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I don't find myself needing to really pull lower than 3.5 too often anyway.
Yeah.
Wide open though, like super sharp. That was the other thing, is like I didn't feel any need to step down as well as like not get any wider, because it was just corner to corner so sharp wide open, which was kind of nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you in particular were impressed with the minimum focusing distance of what, 4.5 inches on this lens?
It's like 4.5 inches, which with the lens hood, I'm pretty sure from the sensor is a little bit past that. So like the minimum focus distance is inside the lens hood. Like,
are we positive about that? If not, it's really close.
I did some video test at home even just to like see how close I could get, and so I'm like sitting here putting it up into my face, and it gets right here and it's still focusing, and it's slower, but at the same time I don't expect a lens to be like snappy when you're doing something that's from like infinity and then hanging out in the macro zone, you know?
Yeah.
It's just not anything I've ever seen like something do snappy like that.
No, that's why those lenses tend to have the different sections of focus so that you can like
Just
knock
skip
out
over
that
it,
whole
yeah.
macro area, because it does take a really long focus throw to like get that fine-tuned. So even though it does have a really close minimum focusing distance, it's still 24 millimeters, so don't expect like 1-to-1 macro magnification here. It's 0.5 magnification, which is still really good for that wide aperture.
And it was also
lens.
really difficult even in like full sun, finding a lighting situation where when you get that close you aren't completely blotting out all your own light. So you have to get some sort of crazy like whatever LED or reflecting setup to actually make that useful.
Yeah, it needs like the Laowa thing, the Venus Optics. It needs some sort of like LED built in around the front element. Moving to the 35 millimeter f2, I will say I feel like a connoisseur of 35s right now, because in my bag...
Yeah, if anybody's qualified right now.
In my bag, I own right now the 35 millimeter 1.2 from Sigma, the 35 millimeter 1.4 Zeiss, and the 35 millimeter 1.4 G Master, the new one that just came out. I have my buddy's Samyang 35 millimeter 1.4. And what does Sigma go and do?
Yeah.
And releases a 35 millimeter redesigned art for E Mount. So I almost need to get that.
Pause on that one.
Pause on that video so we can get that lens.
Yeah.
Anyways, I got 35. Your boy's got 35 millimeter covered.
Let it be known, I got 35s.
Despite having that and being extremely excited about both the Sigma 35-1.2 and the 35 millimeter G Master, I still found myself reaching for this 35 millimeter f2 when it was in my bag. Just being so compact.
I was surprised to hear how often you're using it.
Yeah, there were times where I was just like, well, I'm not shooting at 1.4, 1.6, or 1.8, so like I'll take the size benefit. And this lens feels premium and focuses wonderfully. Like I don't feel like I was getting a lesser quality lens. I just felt like I was using a more narrow aperture lens. That's it. You know, that was like the only difference. It felt fantastic. Again, performance through the roof. But you were less interested in the 35 millimeter.
Yeah, and the only reason for that, and I swear I put it on and I tried to get into it, but I have a 35 1.8 from Sony. And the reason I even put it on in the first place is like, oh, it's gonna be so much cheaper and it's gonna be, you know, a different value comparison, and it's not. Problem is like, first off, used for a Sony 35 1.8, you can actually get for like $100 less, but even new, it's only like $50 more. And for 30, to jump from, you know, 1.8 from 2 to 1.8, that's about $50 worth to me. Like, but on the same token though, like I have zero complaints with my 35 1.8, like none. And it honestly, I have to like, I'll be at like weddings and stuff, and I'll have to like, dude, put a different lens on, like switch it up, because I can't do 35 all day. I can, I don't want the couple to get 35 all day, like. And so it was a really hard, like value-wise for me to just put like heart and soul into that thing, when the 35 1.8 probably my favorite lens right now. Yeah, that's understandable. And again, this would not be an issue if you're on Leica or Panasonic or Sigma. Question. You'd still be considering that 35 f2. So another fantastic lens, but specifically on Sony, just maybe a decreased amount of interest because of the alternatives available. It's close enough though that if I didn't have either and I just tried them both, or if I had gotten the Sigma and then found out about the 35 1.8, I wouldn't sell it to get the 1.8.
Right.
It honestly is that close.
You're like, oh, whatever I have, like it's not any different.
Yeah, 100%.
This brings us to the 45 millimeter 2.8, which is only one of these 4 lenses that isn't brand new. Been around for a bit, and it kind of shows, right? It just, I mean, build quality still fantastic, still feels like a beast.
Exact same design language as the others.
Yeah,
so
autofocus speed still feels really good, but it's the only one of the 4 that I used that was a little bit soft wide open. You stop down a little bit, f3.2, f3.5, and that's pretty much gone. But the other ones, you didn't have to do that. They were all super sharp, even wide open. And so for it to be soft at 2.8 a little bit, for a lens range that, you know, there's a ton of competition around 45 millimeters. You can go 50 1.8. Sony's is awful, their original one, but they've also got the 50 2.5. That just came out, right? There's like a Samyang 40 or 45 millimeter 1.8. There's alternatives, right? You've got alternatives from
and
Zeiss,
not the tanky
Sony.
Zeiss one. Like that's a whole different league. But other than that, there's still a lot of competition.
Yeah, but the 45 is super tiny. So if you're prioritizing tiny build quality and you can live with shooting at f3.2, not f2.8, then I think it's a decent option. But otherwise, I do think that it's kind of the one that I would skip from this series.
I was really surprised to see how much you've fallen in love with 50 millimeter. Like as of even just last year, I feel like you went hard in the 50.
Yeah, I'd say it's been since about 2019 now. So about 2 years that I've gone crazy for 50. It's the most used lens nowadays for me.
Which is weird because it's a dead zone for me. At least it used to be a dead zone. It's like from 35 to like 70. I just didn't really find myself shooting in a lot. But that might change with this 4th lens.
Yeah. The 4th one, the 65 millimeter f2, is undoubtedly like the shining star of this series. All the premium qualities of all the other lenses, right? It's the same in that regard, but where this thing punches up is just, its sharpness is on a different level.
Wide open, so sharp.
Yeah, and also it was such a surprisingly pleasant focal length to shoot at, right?
Surprising is definitely the word. Yeah, I was.
And it's funny because we were in the studio shooting so much the month before, and what did I keep on saying? I kept on saying, I need like a 60-something millimeter lens. Because I was shooting at 50 and it was too wide in here, and I was shooting at 85 and I was too close, at least specifically when I shoot one direction in my studio. And I was like, I need something 60, and that's like the dark horse of photography lenses. Nobody makes, outside of zooms, nobody's really making 60 millimeter anything. In low light, I used it during a wedding quite a bit. Did it for these outdoor portraits, and I remember thinking like, oh wow, I like my 65 ones better than my 85 millimeter G Master ones.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because that's a $1,500 lens. If there was any to consider, and you're kind of you're new to the Sony and you haven't invested in maybe like the 50 and the 85.
I don't see why not.
65 is kind of where I would go. I would know if I were trying to have a smaller kit right now, it might be something like 24, 65, 135. I could get by merging those two lenses together.
Yeah, I'd be like 20, 35, 65. And I love 85, but at that point, I'd just jump to a 135.
Why get it from a 65?
Yeah, that's my next hopeful is to pull off getting a 135. Because Ooh. My wow factor for sharpness is this is the one where like it made my camera feel sharp, or my A7 III, because I'm so used to like dealing with your like A7R, you know, and like I'll go to 200% zoom and capture one and it still looks good, and I did it with my A7 III and I'm like, okay, let's just go back to 100 like we're supposed to do. But it made it feel like I had more resolving power on my camera, which is nuts. But it wasn't too much, you know, like on even like really clean, sharp like skin textures, it wasn't like overly sharp. I did, however, like my normal Capture One import puts the same sharpness on everything, and I usually just have to bump it up depending on the situation. This is the very first time where I actually had to like roll it back a little bit, which was really surprising. But I would say my biggest recommendation, or my biggest, I guess, qualifier for this is the one that I actually probably will pick up for myself. Like,
and this is the one that I'm gonna miss if I like.
It's totally
it's very hard for me to want to buy more lenses when I have the 1.4, the highest end of like every, you know, Sony out there. It's really hard for me to add more lenses, but this one I'm like, I could really see a world where I have the 50 and the 85 out of my bag and just use this one instead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Save so much space.
And weight.
And weight.
So much weight.
Yeah. I mean, I've got that stupid G Master on the way, the 1.2. So overall, like, pleasant experience on all 4 lenses. Absolutely enjoyed using them. Don't exactly recommend the 45mm 2.8. All 3 of the other ones, if you're looking for durable, if you're looking for compact, right, to retain a small physical size to your kit, without necessarily, they're all still light because they're so small. They're just not light for their dense size. Yeah. Right. So I feel bad saying like they're not light. They're just not light compared to like Tamron's.
They're just not cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not like cheap lightweight lenses.
Right.
So if you're like looking for something that'll really last, take a little bit of abuse if it happens. I could see a lot of people who are looking for like travel primes, right? That would work really well for this. And if you're just looking for absolute monster of a wider portrait lens, 65mm f2 just gets a big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, especially if the resolving power sticks on an A7R4, like then sky's the limit. So
I'll
like,
show some stupid f8 shots on that lens. I'll zoom in, they're just ridiculous.
Big shout out to Sigma, by the way. Hopefully we get their 105 macro in. That's the one that I'm like peak excited about. I think we could do some really crazy stuff with that.
And I need to round out my 35 video with the redesigned 35 art, because I was unwilling to include the adapted art in my comparison. So it's funny that they were releasing it at this time.
Mm-hmm. But I think this, for me, this series, the biggest like effect that it's had on me is that whole hiccup, that stuttering like issue that we had when they first started putting out their art lenses. I just lost a lot of confidence, and honestly, it's all kind of back. Like, they can clearly make a dope Sony lens. Like,
yes, 100%. When they can, well, I mean, I've been feeling that way. I felt that way with the 24-70 was my eye-opening experience to that.
That's totally fair.
Because you guys know, this is the 3rd Sigma video on my channel, and it's the first one that's largely positive, right? But I have their 24-70 f2.8 and the 35mm 1.2. When Sigma designs explicitly for the E Mount and there's no adapting or moving, it's been fantastic. Yeah. So really happy to see that, because more options is just better for the buyer.
Sweet.
All right, hope you guys got something out of this video, saw the samples. I'll keep a link in the description if you want to pixel peep a few of these options a little bit more, so you can look in a little bit more closely. Should have said that at the beginning of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, Until the next time, though. Not this time, but then the next one.